Welcome to the CTO2CTO podcast, where Chief Technology Officers dig into the challenges and opportunities that leaders face every day at the intersection of business and innovation. I'm your host, Lucas Hendricks, CTO at Forte Group.
Hello, this is Lucas Hendricks, host of the CTO2CTO podcast. Today I'm with Vinay Kapoor from Expana, who is the Chief Product Officer and Interim Chief Technology Officer.
That's right. Hi everyone, Vinay Kapoor. As Lucas mentioned, I'm the Chief Product Officer and Interim Chief Technology Officer at Expana. Happy to be here. Look forward to the conversation, Lucas.
Wonderful to have you here. So jumping right in with your title.
Yep.
This is a theme that we've spoken about in other episodes of the podcast of what I believe is a general trend, and the thesis is the Chief Product Technology Officer role is becoming more common as it becomes, let's say, easier to rapidly develop products. And not to say that technology is diminished, but it's certainly changed from obviously keeping the lights on and making sure everyone has a laptop that works. So I'm kind of curious about two things. First, what's your view on that shift? And do you observe similar phenomena? And also, just how did you get here, and what was your journey like, to this sort of hybrid role?
Yeah, absolutely. And so this is my second stint doing this, sort of dual role. In my past role, past job, I was also Chief Product Officer, and then I did a period of time until I left the company where I was also the CTO. I would say there I was much more of the CPTO as opposed to the interim CTO. Here, I've been interim CTO, and in both cases, the way I ended up sort of having the title or having the job and the role was that the business needed a CTO function for one reason or the other. Not important to get into details, but the business needed a CTO to sort of step in, and the board asked, or I raised my hand in the other case and said, I'm happy to do it. But I was very clear in both cases, and this is going to sort of lead into your second question, that I only want to do this role in the interim. And there are some important reasons, and I have some philosophical reasons for why I go that way and why I said what I said. So yes, there is absolutely a trend for the CPTO role, and I think there is a great time and place for organizations to have a CPTO in-house. Some of the pros of that are, a CPTO is one person. You have both functions. You're making your organization structure easier. Somewhat, Conway's law comes into play here. You can simplify organization structures. They can really be true value stream driven organizational structures, and you don't have silos. And you can really structure the organization and mold it in a way that you as the individual want to. And for the CEO, what happens is that you have one person to go talk to, which is great. And I think in certain situations where if the business is not very tech heavy or early stage, where the founder is stepping off this product role. Typically, in a small organization, the founder should be playing a product person's role. You should not have a CPO. That doesn't. I don't believe in that.
Right.
But once the founder is ready to move on,
it serves to scale something.
Yeah, exactly. When you're starting to scale, it's a good idea to bring in someone who can do a little bit of both, because the organization, two executives, etc., etc. However, what a CTO brings to the table, and the reason why the irony of this is me having had both these roles a couple of times, I actually believe that at scale and in tech heavy businesses or real technology tech and engineering organizations, if you're a SaaS product, for example, the CTO has a very important role to play, and that role is to really set the strategy and the vision of the technology function and engineering function beyond what the product function is dictating. So product in general is really close to the end user, the customer. The product function, good product people are very close to the user, and they can prioritize and sort of set the vision of the product. However, what a CTO brings to the table is, beyond that, from a technology perspective, really how should the business scale What if you acquire an organization? What if you are acquired? What if you want to bring different types of data? What if you need to scale and security and compliance, and you're in industries that are regulated? You need a proper vision for that. And yes, AI and technology has gotten to a point where you can automate some of the technology functions quite a bit. I think it's the strategy piece where the CTO really, brings in value and can help an organization.
Yeah, I think it also depends if it's a true SaaS company or if it's a technology-enabled services company, which gets very blurry.
That's correct.
That I think one benefit of unifying the roles is that it, whether you're coming from one discipline or the other, is that it might lend some impartiality to decisions that, if you ask a surgeon, should you operate, what's a surgeon going to say? I mean, nothing against surgeons, but typically that's the function. So if you're a company building your own proper technology and that's an important part of the company, then a chief technology officer is critical. But if you're facing these decisions, and particularly in a landscape where it may be more about integration than actual build, then it might take some of that bias out too.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to put it as well. Like if you quote unquote segment the needs, now I'm speaking product language, but if you segment the needs of who should think about CPTO versus really invest in the CTO function, it's a great way to think about it. If you are looking at your business and you're not spending a ton of time building novel technologies, and you're basically using platforms that are out there, integrating them, maybe you're more like what you need is more like a IT function almost. You're not true engineering. There's a big difference between those.
Yep.
So if you're not doing true engineering, and even if you're doing engineering, it's at small scale to bring things together, and you're either a services organization or somebody who's using technology as an enabler. Yeah, it's a great question. It simplifies your life. As a CEO, your life will be easier. But if you are really that technology function, you're building technology, then you need to ask yourself, when is the right time, and you should think about bringing in a good CTO. Good CTOs can be transformational for businesses for many reasons.
Well, I guess like you could say that's if your moat is around the technology, then absolutely.
Absolutely.
And if so, in that position, and right now you're in an interim CTO. So where does that evolve to? Do you see that going in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Expana is a business that is very heavily we are a very data driven business. We have a lot of proprietary data. We invest a lot in data. We have a very large data function. So we also have a chief data officer, my peer Luana. And for us, technology is a real differentiator that we build on top of that data. So we have a very feature rich platform and a product that people use in order to get to those market insights in the agri-food space where we play. So if one of our customers is looking at how to reduce margin or how to improve margins and reduce costs by looking at their basket of goods that they buy and commodities they buy, they're using our feature functions, and a lot of engineering goes into that. So absolutely, I think as a business, it's the prerogative of the board and our CEO, but I absolutely see that evolving into a proper CTO function at some point. And that's why I'm talking about me being the interim person, and this is something that is fairly well known in the organization as well.
Yeah. It's an interesting question too. That so if it's a data driven business, and it's a question of acquisition of data and then what you do to transform that data that creates your competitive edge, it's really not the same thing as a SaaS platform anymore, right? It's a totally different. So that leads to the question about data. So there's an awful lot of hype, I believe, around AI data in general, meaning that there's a lot of promise, but there's kind of a gap, at least I observe, maybe others observe, between where companies are with their data actually right now and this bright future. of models for everything.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
Oh my God, that's
Is that
such
too
a
pessimistic of me to say?
no.
Is it-
I love the question because it's absolutely true, and I'm laughing because we can talk about this for hours. I actually have a blog on Medium, so I do some blogging on Medium, and one of the blogs
Tell
I
us the
have,
blog. Get it
yeah,
out there.
yeah. So it's, shameless self promotion. But one of the blog posts I just made recently was titled "Why Your AI Strategy Will Fail." And what's happening in the market is AI is a transformational technology, and it has been for decades. But with Gen AI specifically now, with the latest sort of movement, what we are seeing is the barrier to entry for organizations to really use AI for use cases is very low. You can use Vercel v0 to code something, deploy it. You can use Claude Sonnet alongside VS Code and use the Copilot to start building some prototypes. No, you should not put this in production, but you can get pretty far with these things. So a lot of people are looking at that and saying, okay, so I can just go build an AI product and just go out there and launch it. The problem is that the fundamentals never really go away. And AI is a transformational technology when done right. And being the product person, maybe I'm biased, but you always need to start with the why. What are you trying to do? And what value are you bringing to the end user? Now, whether that's an internal user and you're looking at an efficiency use case internally, like maybe you have a lot of people who write a lot of stuff and you want to reduce the amount of time they spend, leading to a cost saving and better profit margins. Or maybe you have a lot of users who it's an external use case where your users are looking for unique insights that they haven't been able to get out of the product and the data that you have. So you need to start with that why. And then on top of that, you really need to invest in data. If you don't have clean and good data practices and you don't invest in your data function, you are basically building a house of cards.
Yeah.
Because the AI is going to reflect what's being fed. Even the fact that LLMs are trained on large bodies of text and content on the entire internet, or Encyclopedia Britannica and whatnot, but you're giving it a context, you're building a RAG, you're feeding some contextual data into it. If you're not doing that, by the way, if you're just writing a ChatGPT wrapper, you need to just stop because you have no moat. But at the very minimum, you're giving it some context. Okay, so that data becomes very important. But then there is one more layer before you go to launching a product, which is you need to think about tools, practices, governance. How are you going to evaluate the LLM, or if you're using traditional AI models for classification, etc. How are you going to make sure that there's no model drift and the thing doesn't go off on tangents? How do you make sure it's not hallucinating? And you need tooling for that. You need the right people for that. And then you need to think about ethics. There are examples of people building recruitment tools that for recruitment started to have a bias towards men. And there are tools that have shown all sorts of problems and bias. So because the data fed to it is biased. So ethics is important. You need to think about all of this when you go to market with your AI product or AI strategy. No, you shouldn't have to think about all of this when you're prototyping.
Right.
It's great to get a prototype out, talk to the board, talk to the CEO, talk about the business case. Here is all the good stuff that it can do. But then before you launch it out into the wild, maybe think about am I using the right data?
And I think that's spot on. I mean, I think there's almost a lot of confusion that gets generated in these early cycles around adoption of things like LLMs. I mean, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I remember looking at machine learning cases that the only question in terms of viability was really the horsepower that we had at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we introduce Gen AI, and in some ways, I feel like it's eating the world like Excel does. It's all of a sudden, it's just the productivity tool for everything, which I think is a great advance. It gets us there faster. It's great for prototyping. But if you don't have the right principles in place, absolutely, it also injects a ton of risk. But what a big distraction that causes for product people, right? Because now you've got to add this to your it just, if the discipline is saying no to features,
Yeah.
then now you've got this whole landscape that you can't shun it, but you've got to
True.
embrace it in some way.
Yeah, and I think you have to embrace it. Like that's the short message that So like going back to what I just said a few minutes ago, the reason why I said what I said was just to highlight the fact that it's very important to work on the foundations. Having said that, it is also extremely important for any product person out there, or engineering folks and engineers, to really dive headfirst into what's going on and empower yourselves for two reasons. One is just forget about the end user for a minute. It's what you mentioned, right? That's very powerful. Just the productivity gain, and it's a superpower. I'm encouraging my team to look at tools. Yeah, how can you write better user stories? Can we prototype? Can we use coding tools and coding copilots to prototype better? There is a ton of stuff, and it's a superpower for anybody out there, especially product people. There's so much of the work that was done manually that you can now automate, and if you're starting to use these tools in day to day, then you can get 20-30% more done. So you're a more productive person, and not only are you getting a productivity gain, but in some cases you're probably getting a better output. Now, whether it's because you're able to spend more time doing the higher functions of thinking and strategizing, or it's because you have a co-pilot or an LLM to work with, which is able to, in some cases actually work better than a human, but let's not go there. It's the augmented intelligence piece that I like to talk about, which really helps.
I totally agree, especially, the former part of that is what I find it allows me to do is connect ideas, sometimes across disciplines, sometimes across technologies, sometimes across different paradigms.
Yeah.
In such a faster way than it would take me to either write it out or code it.
Yeah.
And those sort of leaps and bounds, I feel like are really important, but I do think it's still very much in that, if you're thinking at a very practical level, what am I doing this sprint?
Yes.
Well, I've got to do these 3 stories that are very complex, algorithmic, and that is not the case.
Yeah, and I think,
But I've got a spike that says, figure out, should we be using a different front-end library for this?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to sort of what I mentioned earlier, which is the fundamentals don't change. As a product person, your job still is to prioritize based on what's most valuable for your end user, and looking at everything that's in the backlog, which everybody has a backlog that's a mile long. So look at your backlog and constantly grooming the backlog, and then for product leaders to make sure that you're thinking about both the short-term strategy but also the long-term strategy, and thinking about the value that your users are getting. So none of that changes. You still have to do all of that, and you look at AI as one of two things: either an enabler for that prioritization, so how can I do that prioritization better, or for my end users, by building AI tools and AI features and functions, am I doing something that's fundamentally transformational that really helps us cross-sell, upsell, bring in net new logos, enter new markets? Are we able to open up new markets? Are we able to dig deeper? And what is the value of that? So you should still have to do the ROI math. And
I was going to say, one of my best mentors in the product space, a true product person, has a great framework for ROI that I learned from. That I think that's part of the gap right now, is that I don't know how much true ROI analysis is being done on all these use cases.
Yeah.
And it's a discipline that also I think applies to internal use of AI. If you're getting, let's say, a force multiplier effect, because you can, all of a sudden you don't have to write unit tests anymore.
Yeah.
What a great case. No one can argue that.
Yeah.
But then someone is trying to do something more complex, and really it's taking several prompts or several iterations. And what I find sometimes is you get there 85% in the first prompt or the first attempt.
Yeah.
You refine that and you lose ground.
Yeah.
So that's a 1.2 or even a 0.8% multiplier on your productivity. Doing that analysis and then incorporating that into your operating model, I think, is an important step. And I don't know that, we have a model for it. I'm an economist by background, so I like to model everything, but I don't know how many organizations are really modeling the impact of the tooling.
Not enough, right, is the short answer. And I think this is what differentiates product people who are, and well, I'm talking about product, but in general, anybody who's working on a use case and making a pitch, quote unquote. But good product people always have that at the back of your mind. The best product managers and the best product people have economics and finance background or a deep understanding of what metrics are important and how they move the top line, the bottom line, the EBITDA. All of that is very, very important, because at the end of the day, when you're talking to the CFO, you're talking to the CEO, you're talking to the board, yes, they get excited about technology, but they want to know is like, what's the ultimate impact? And one way you can measure that impact is through product metrics. Yes, DAU, MAU, stickiness, retention, etc. But ultimately, if you can speak as a product person the language of the board, and you can do something simple, okay, we are deploying this tool. Just do simple math on how many minutes or hours it saves per person. How many people are going to use it? Okay, multiply that by the number of days they work, average hourly rate that you can get from the CFO. It takes less than an hour to collect this data and put it in an Excel file. And you have a simple ROI calculator that you can take to somebody on your finance team can then work with you and get something out. And then you can get sophisticated. You can think about what's above that line, below the line, and EBITDA impact and all of that. So there's no real reason why people shouldn't be doing that. And I think as a product person, if you can do that, it's such a force multiplier for the organization. And also, by the way, great for your career, right? Like if you want to go from an individual contributor to a product leader, start speaking the language of the business, start speaking the language of the CFO and the board, and people will want to talk to you. And
then, as a confession, I read this book a few years back called Financial Intelligence. I mean, a real primer, right? Like, I want to understand the balance sheet. I want to understand the mechanics of that.
Yeah.
And invaluable, really.
It is. Yeah. And not enough people will look at product metrics and really do the last mile. As product people, we spend a lot of time and energy obsessing with product metrics, as we should, right? So bring in like a third-party tool like Pendo or Mixpanel or Amplitude, whatever you use to build those product analytics. And a lot of energy goes into that, but it's the last mile after that where you connect those metrics to financial metrics, whether it's top line ARR growth, or it's your EBITDA impact, or retention, which really leads to net revenue retention or gross revenue retention, etc. And that's the work. Now, it's not easy. Let's be clear, for anybody listening to this, rolling their eyes, going like, yeah, sure, fine, done. No, it's not easy, but we are not here to do easy things. We are here to do powerful things.
But I think the result could make it easier for others. So I think having, and this is where I see, sometimes there's confusion, especially if you're introducing, let's take a traditional services company that started on paper, transformed to digital, and now they're kind of in that middle of things, and what they offer, it looks like a SaaS platform, but it's really a service. And and these are really interesting companies because a lot of them are mid-market and growth, but have a lot of technical debt, and they've got a product function, and that product function is very consumer focused, it's very market focused, but there's also a real challenge in understanding what the key metrics are. What does good look like?
Yeah.
And I always use this example. Anyone who's heard me before, my kids, would say, I obviously repeat myself because I'm old, but regardless of what you think about, Elon Musk, the key metric for SpaceX, what is it? It's reducing the cost of metric tons to space. If everyone is thinking about that, and every decision they make, it is so clarifying. Does this small feature, does this move the needle or not? And that's the job, is to get to that simplicity so you can create alignment, I think.
Yeah, and it's a great sort of, it's a bit of a tangent, and, I'll not spend too much time on this, but what you talked about is also very important for product people to really nail down the North Star metric. What's the one metric that the organization should stand behind? And it's so important. And then it's easier to connect that last mile, because you're looking at one metric that you turn as an organization, and factor that into your process and planning, and then connect that with what's the ultimate business impact.
So as an interim CTO, how do you and I'm going to couch this by saying, first, I don't know if there's any definition of a CTO that's valid anymore because it varies so much. And because of what you're talking about, usually it's a blend of responsibilities, a blend of skills.
Yeah.
I think it is almost an industrial factory mindset to think that it's the person who has all the depth across all the technology in the enterprise is I think is kind of outdated, especially since that depth is now augmented by all of these large language models. So given that sort of like, what would you change so that becoming a CTO would be more like a CPTO, or what is it that maybe what's the gap? Why can't it be one role?
Yeah, and I think it boils down to sort of it's not capability or competence per se. Yes, it is very hard to find somebody who has both product mindset and deep technical knowledge and technical vision, which, by the way, there are gaps. So I'm not like a deep technical expert, and I don't pretend to be that. What I bring to the table in that interim CTO role is like, I know how to scale organizations. I like working with people, and I know how to spot talent. So, hiring the right people, making sure that, finding the gaps in the organization and hiring people that then tell you what to do, as opposed to you telling them what to do, right? So building a strong technology function that's led by technology leaders and not pretending to lead it yourself. Right, so we have some great leaders within engineering, and our VP of engineering is a very, very talented technology leader. So making sure that you can fill those gaps. Just to shortly answer that question, that it's not a competence or capability thing. I think there are two things and two reasons why it's good to, in certain situations, especially if you're technology led, and the larger you get, the more important this is, to have two separate people. One is checks and balances. Product people by definition will prioritize product backlogs. We just have this tendency to, just go run after the user as we should, right? So you want to prioritize what's good for the user. And then you have sort of the need to get things out faster, be incremental, but, what can we do to reduce cycle times, etc. And you can very quickly end up in a situation where you're just building tech debt, and that technical debt is being accumulated, and you're either not aware of it, or you're aware of it and you're just ignoring it because you don't understand the importance, because that's where your skill gap is, and you're just able to ignore it, or you don't know what it's going to lead to in the future. And that debt will at some point show up on the balance sheet as an investment in dollars that you have to make, either in technology or people, to pay that debt down. Right, because it's not scaling or the whatever. So that's one thing. Just the checks and balances. So CTO, an independent CTO, will be able to say, well, hold on a minute. I can see that we are about to, bring on a lot of users. Our current technology is not able to scale up. So, we took on some debt. We need to pay that down, or we've built this authentication function, and, whatever that's going to look like, our SSO has a ton of tech debt, let's pay some of that down. So, prioritizing the right things from a technology perspective is one thing. The other is with everything that's going on in the market, especially AI and whatnot, it's very hard for everyone to stay up to date on everything.
That's absolutely right.
So having a CTO,
you need more eyes on the.
You need more eyes on that, and just staying up to date with what's happening with both. Just your cloud providers, but AI, and then the product function is keeping an eye on what's happening from a product perspective is very important.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the end of the day too, when you're defining architecture, because that's really where, at least in my view, the risk is if you, and I'm using architecture in the broadest sense, but architecture is like, it's a decision in time that impacts the foreseeable future, and therefore you start reducing options as soon as you define it.
Yeah.
Meaning that there's a ton of skin in that game.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. That it's not fair to put that on one person, and yet that often is happens, or it's the only choice you have because you're a technical founder, and by God, you got to get to market. Even then, you get a pass, though, right?
You do.
Because someone's going to invest and say, okay, time to unwind that and scale it.
Yeah.
But that's, I guess, where the two roles become very important.
Yeah. And what we haven't talked about a lot is like the organizational patterns, right? So a CTO who's really been out there, has delivered in different operations, scale up, startup, 0 to 1, 1 to 10, multiple products, multiple different cloud vendors, different types of products, has seen organizational patterns and knows what works, what doesn't work. Just like it is true on the product side, right? So product people, you can say the exact same thing, replace technology by product, and you get the same outcome. So having that knowledge of the organizational pattern, like, no, we need this, or we need to organize the team in this manner. We need a platform team. Oh no, we don't need a platform team right now. We need vertical stack team. So whatever that looks like, right? It's different for everyone, and having a person who knows that and has seen that and can really be there for you, with you on that journey, is very important.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I keep going back and forth in my thinking around this. It's almost having a dialogue, I think. How do you maintain a dialogue? And maybe that's, in the future, will be you and the model, right? Who knows?
Maybe there are two models having this.
Let the
chat
models
in the
have
future.
that.
Yeah, there's a podcast.
Let me know when you come to consensus.
Yeah, exactly.
Then we'll just tell the board, and we could be So here's a fun question. This is particularly fun because I work for a provider of services, and you are a consumer of services. So so gloves off. What's the most, I don't know, you deal with all kinds of different vendors. What's the vendor pitch that makes you cringe the most? What is it that you look at and you're just, oh my God, I can't believe that another one of these companies, what are they trying to sell me?
I think when somebody comes in and starts talking about, cost savings, or using that like normal pitch of, I'm going to help you save money, is when you start to go like, but do you know what I'm trying to do? Like, do you really understand? Maybe what's very important to me is, staying close to my customer. So I think I took cost savings as an example. That's not the ultimate cringe, but the cringe is when a vendor comes in and delivers a prepared pitch that I can clearly see is prepared, and is they haven't taken the time to understand the business and ask questions. When I start to think about, like, is this the right vendor? I think I much prefer a vendor that comes in with an open mind and says, okay, let's have a conversation. Let's just understand, what are you trying to achieve? What's important to you? And what value are you trying to get, and how can we help? And just having that conversation is for me much more important than somebody who comes with a prepared pitch, where you can see, okay, this is the vendor that clearly focuses on cost saving. This is the vendor that clearly focuses on we'll build these AI tools for you. Well, do you know if I need AI tools? Maybe I already have an internal machine learning team and somebody who's really good at Gen AI. So maybe I don't need that. So I think that's the short answer.
Yeah, it's an interesting space, and I could say from being on both sides of it, it's unfortunate that sometimes you have to cut through so many layers to get to the value creation conversation.
Exactly.
Because there is a sort of specialization in trade in services as well, where it's just at the right time you need someone who knows the reference architecture, and it's going to take you X months to hire to do that. Although it's sometimes really hard to get to that conversation. From the buy side, it's hard because you're just, who do you choose? It's the biggest TAM you can imagine with all of these options. So even if you are looking at cost savings, you're looking at sort of increments across regions and tons of trade-offs, and each vendor is going to be an expert in their own offering. They're not going to understand how to evaluate across the board. So it just becomes, even though it should be an easy decision, it becomes this like death by 1,000 cuts, because you're trying to figure out, in any change you make organizationally, unless it's some pure greenfield capex, like let's run with it.
And there is a time and place for that, right?
Great to have.
Yeah, exactly. It's great to have as an option, and there is, I use, again, I just to clarify, I use cost savings as an example, but of course there is a time and place where you want to entertain that and need to entertain that, right? I mean, but it's more, my point is that pre-prepared pitches where somebody hasn't taken the time to understand your business or your model and what you're trying to achieve, that's where you really run into problems. I'm a huge, just to be open, I'm a huge fan of using the right vendors for the right use cases and the right needs. I think it's very important, even for technology organizations that live and breathe technology and that's their mode. you're not always going to have the right skill at the right time for the right thing, and you don't always want to go and invest into all of the time and energy it takes to bring somebody on board full time, hire people. It takes time to find the right people. You may not even have the right people to hire the right people, right?
Right.
Like, what do you know? Let's say you're trying to build a data lake house on Databricks, and you've never worked with Databricks, and you have nobody in your organization who knows how to work with Databricks. How do you know how to hire the right people?
That's a wonderful example, because learning about that, learning how to do that organizationally, incorporating that's a huge shift.
It's a huge shift. So maybe work with a vendor who's an expert, who's done this before, and ease into it, and that gives you the option of flexibility. You can sort of see if this is the right fit. You can try the technology. You can learn about it, and over time, as you start to ease into it and you get more confident, and it's sort of starting to become part of the fabric of your organization, then you bring it in house. And that's just one example I'm taking.
Yeah.
And there are other examples like that. So it's whether you're going after a specific skill set, you're going after a specific type of pattern, or maybe it is really cost savings that you're after. There are different reasons why you should use vendors, and I'm a big fan of using the right vendors for the right reasons in the right place.
I think that's spot on, and I think it's partially true that cost is a driver still, although I think there's a big equilibrium effect, and that's going to continue, meaning that as people are just distributed, that it impacts, it's just going to level out. It creates equilibrium over time.
Yeah.
So what will matter will be you need 1,000 eyes on a problem,
Yes.
and you only have 10. How do you scale that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the scalability is like a key thing, which I love working with vendors, because it gives you such a great sort of way to scale things, and the flexibility that you get out of it is just, it's invaluable.
The last question, which I love talking about my kids. I assume you do too. So I'm curious about your son, who is a national competitor.
Yeah.
As a fencer.
Yes.
So what has that taught you?
Yeah, so both my boys, Tanmay and Krish, I have two boys. They both compete in fencing. Tanmay is in college now, so he's taken a step back.
They get to spar, as you say, spar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, once in a while. Yeah, no fencing in the house. And both of them, have competed on the national level. And Tanmay, before he sort of took a step back from fencing because he's now in college, was a Division II fencer and competed at the national level. In saber, so that's one of the weapons, and it's just amazing.
Oh, this could be a whole podcast about.
This will be a whole podcast
FA
about
versus
fencing.
saber.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And I think the thing that I've learned watching my kids compete at that level and sort of take back is a couple of things. I say the first thing is just watching them, go into a bout, and not all bouts go well. And if we'll go into like details of fencing here, but the way fencing works is you first have pools where you have like these rapid bouts, boom, 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 and then based on how you do, you go to the direct elimination round where you're basically eliminated if you lose. And the pool round is hard because you have these 5 or 6 bouts that you have to do one in a row, and you might be fencing against somebody who's like the #1 fencer in the country, and you don't do so well. And then you have to just reset immediately and go back and then fence the next person. And I've watched them sort of, pick themselves up and just move on and not reflect on what happened, but rather just like, okay, fine, happened, let's move on, next bout. And just watching that and watching that happen in rapid succession is just interesting, and just taking that back and reflecting that on, as a leader, you have a lot of times, you go through difficulties, you have to take hard decisions, or maybe, you have all sorts of problems that you deal with. But how do you keep that mindset where you can reset and continue thinking about the future? There's a famous quote from I think it is Napoleon, who said, a leader's job is to deal in hope. And that's so important. So watching that is amazing. The second is, how to sort of prepare yourself. And it's a combination of, physical fitness practice, nutrition, and everything has to come together. So it's the investment in the craft, and the more you invest, the more you get out of it. So watching them sort of high school, like, when Tanvi was competing nationals, high school, and Krish now, my younger one, high school, pretty difficult, pretty full schedule, let's put it like that. 3-4 hours of practice 2-3 times a week, and sort of switching context and working on that, and you have to invest in the craft. So if you're not practicing, you're not getting anything out of it. So like reminding myself that I have to invest in my craft, which is in my case product, or if I'm working with engineering teams, then that's the craft, but really investing in that and continuing to focus on that. And then the last but not the least is just have fun along the way. When there is a break in between, they're just having fun, all of these kids, because it's a small community. The fencing community is rather small. The kids who are fencing, they end up seeing each other in multiple competitions, and they are fencing each other and competitors at one point, and then they're going and having fun.
Yeah.
Right? And just watching that and stepping back, and that's remember to have fun.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. There's so many metaphors there too, for things that we face. And one thing that made me think of is there's one of the many books I read that I always recommend is Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, and it's
a great book.
Yeah. So the analogy I think of here is that you may lose a match, but you're going to execute with the same formula of technique. You're not going to improvise. You're going to. And there's an anecdote in the book about, I forget who it was, but a coach who loses the Super Bowl because he said, I'm going to pass on this 4th down as opposed to run, or vice versa. And the next day said, I would do the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Sure, I lost, but I would execute the same way because the probability of success is much higher.
Yeah.
So it teaches you to think in terms of the probability as opposed to, to sort of randomly, So I love that. I love that. I think we're at time. I guess I'll just say thank you for listening in. It's been great talking with Vinay, and hope you join us again in the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
This was it for this episode. Join us next time for more real-world conversations between technology leaders. And if you like what you heard, subscribe to CTO2CTO. See you soon.